Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Light Body Live, where we provide a framework for personal development, for the expansion of consciousness, and to gain experience with the emerging light body and its components. When we say experience with the light body, we could compare that to when we were infants, because in a way, with the light body, at best, we're like toddlers. But we're also most of the time like infants. And when we're born into the human world, we have a hand, but we're not really using it specifically. We notice that it's there at some point, we move it, and at a certain point we start to reach. And then we realize, oh, we can grab something. And then as we grow, we realize we can refine those operations, throw a ball. We can then learn how to write words or symbols. We can play a musical instrument. And so it becomes very precise and very um, refined. And we're at that stage now of infancy or toddlership within the light body development. So we're offering techniques and awarenesses to connect to those emerging facilities, faculties that we have, and learn how to use them for some of their intended operations. And so that's the purpose of what we're providing on this channel. It's a framework for personal development. And that framework, though, at the same time, is very flexible. It's very liquid. So it's not a rigid, set way of doing things, but it's a possibility of ways to use things. And then to learn to organize that intelligently according to our own individual needs. And we also have loosely stated like a network where we can exchange ideas and also have confirmation of experiences that are common. So that kind of validates what we are seeing and what we're experiencing. So we're very excited to do the work ourselves, and we're also quite enthusiastic to share it with others and to get your feedback. Your feedback is very essential and very important to us. We learn and we grow from it, as hopefully you are learning and growing from what we're providing. Now, something we encounter at some point, I think early on in our development, the awakening of consciousness, is the whole idea of the inner guidance. And we have a question, or we have a puzzle that we're trying to solve, a problem in life, and somebody says to us, "Well, just follow your inner guidance. Just check in with yourself." And at first, it's like, well, what does that mean? Like, where is this inner guidance? Is it like a little person inside? And well, in some ways, you could say yes, loosely, but um, as we get more experience, just like again, back to the baby and the toddler, we learn how to access this level of information, because in the end, that's what we're seeking, inner information. And it's not only inside, but it's also outside, in the sense that forms of information that are not coming from people like parents, teachers, siblings, from newspaper, from books, but just from, in a way, nature, from the larger sphere of consciousness. We learn to access that and then bring that into our awareness, and then we can get information that we can act on, and intelligence that we can make decisions about. And so one of the ways that inner guidance gets described, like maybe sometimes a secondary way, is that, well, that's your intuition, or I'm following my instincts. And these for sure are interesting and important ideas and, let's say, avenues of detecting information. However, you may find when you go deeper into it that the accuracy is sometimes flawed. It's interfered, it's distorted because of past experiences, because of conditioning, because of beliefs. And the other thing is that instincts and intuition are not the same thing. Intuition is existing in one dimension of frequency, much more expanded than concept or the usual kind of intellectual information. It's much more expanded than that. It's less in the form of words or specific conceptual ideas. Instincts is our feelings, like we get feeling from our environment, but then we filter that and interpret that through existing filters and ideas about what those feelings mean. So as we go along, we can find ways to clear those filters, to clear those distortions. And in the beginning, we have to also recognize that they exist. So these are two common ways of looking, layers or dimensions of inner guidance. And there may be one that's more reliable, more in a way basic, but at the same time, highly intelligent, highly informed, and is always striving to bring us back into this balance and unencumbered, unfiltered condition. And that is what we can call the proprioceptive layer of inner guidance. There is a force within us that is always striving to make balance, to bring us back into what we call, what's the word, homeostasis, back to not only physical and chemical homeostasis, but also emotional and mental homeostasis, and ultimately vibrational homeostasis. Those are topics that are much larger that we can explore at some time. At a basic level, the proprioceptive system, it's a system within our nervous system. And just to backtrack a little bit, to, to become sensitive to proprioception, we can do that more efficiently if we enable parasympathetic activation. So we've talked a lot about that, and I think the last episode that we did, we talked about that a lot. One common way is through breathing exercises. Breathe in intentionally, we breathe out intentionally, and we feel the body on one level relaxing. And when we really relax deeply, there's also a counter force that lifts us up into being upright. And it's a strengthening, not only letting go, but also a strengthening. And then comes a wider degree of amplitude and motion within the body at a cellular level, at a tissue level. And we start to notice that subtle movement that in a normal state we don't notice at all. And when we start to notice those subtle motions, now we're in touch with the proprioceptive system. And we can start to gather the information that it provides. But in order to understand what kind of information that can be at a basic level, and then we can expand that, we can, um, we can expand and build on that. The proprioceptive system within our body is always trying to bring us back to what we can call alignment. Now, what is alignment? The word sometimes indicates something fixed, a fixed point between A and C. B is the alignment middle point. But in the body, alignment is a dynamic state of not only motion, but adaptation. We're adapting constantly to the environment, situation, to our emotional and mental activity, our physical activity. The earth and the atmosphere of the earth is constantly changing, high tide, low tide, full moon, new moon. And our body has this mechanism called proprioception, which is always trying to keep us in balance and alignment. When we're in motion, as we move, the forces of gravity act on our body differently. And so muscle tension has to continually change in microseconds. If I was in one state of movement and the muscles didn't change, I would collapse. So muscle tension is constantly changing to keep us in a state of balance. And if we expand that idea, it's also trying to keep us in a state of chemical balance and also energetic balance. Um, so, as an example, if we turn our body, the whole spine turns. And if we turn back to the center point, maybe one or two of the vertebrae don't completely come back. We could say, well, now they're not aligned. But the proprioceptive system now will try to pull them back. How do we know that? Because around those two vertebrae, unusual or unnatural muscle tension will form trying to pull it. Now, if we're very flexible, that should take a few moments. But if we're more rigid and there's other misalignments or compressions in the body, then those vertebrae may not be able to come back. And so we stay in that state of tension. And therefore, the nervous system is communicating with the brain that there's something that's out of place. And now there's this tension that's using energy to keep that tension, but also to try to maintain compensation, but also still trying to bring that back to alignment. So that's just a brief, very quick idea about how this is working. But over time, many people at the level of tissue, organ, nervous system develop these points that it tried to adapt, but then couldn't resolve. And we're in this unresolved state, or we can say that's a state of stress. When we're in a state of stress, we have compensations, and both of those together cause a continual use of energy. So physiologically, as we move forward in so-called time, we're in past because the event of the past is still taking place and we're still using energy because of that. If we keep accumulating those systems of stress and tension and misalignment, then more and more of our life force is going to the past. Now, how that also translates into our perception and thinking is whatever was going on in that moment or period of the past is the information we have for the interpretation of what's going on now. So we have like this delayed time going on, and we're not really processing things in real time, in present time. So alignment not only means to bring the body back into harmony, to recover energy that's being lost for something that happened in the past, but it's also bringing us into the present time. It also affects like how we can function in real time or present time, and we interpret things more how they are instead of filtering how they were. So, at a very basic level, proprioception is just trying to keep us in this balance and homeostasis of motion and adaptation. But then it also starts to translate into these other levels of emotion, perception, and ultimately our body and how it's interacting with our energy system. So we become out of sync with ourself and out of sync with our environment, and also out of sync with what we are evolving towards, what we are becoming as awakening and developing beings. And there's where the light body and its development starts to come into play. So, Lynn, is there a question?
Uh, Simon from Switzerland asks, how would you link proprioception and neurosensitivity?
Um, what does he mean by neurosensitivity?
And I believe neurosensitivity refers to someone's nervous system is like hyperactive. So small degrees of sensory input have a much larger impact, like sounds or touch, or so people that are very, very sensitive.
Yeah, yeah, and that's common for people that are in this awakening state to be sensitive to sound, to light, um, and I think that at a certain point, it depends. There are many factors in that, um, but the sensitivity a lot of times is when the proprioceptive is in a state of stress. When the body's in a state of stress, it means that the sympathetic nervous system has become hyperactive. That's suppressing parasympathetic, the ability to relax and regenerate. Instead, because of the situations that we accumulated in various ways in the past, it could be chemical stress, it could be physical trauma, uh, emotional trauma, that the sympathetic nervous system has been hyperactivated. Now, there are neurological studies that show that, and what do they call those? Hyperactive synapses. Yeah, it's hyperactive sympathetic circuits that are firing because of a past event, but they never turned off. And when you have those starting to collect, then we become hypersensitive to different stimulations. So there's part of that that's just because we become more aware of subtleties of motion and stimulation. And part of it is because of this hyperactive life force draining overactivity of the sympathetic nervous system. And the most detrimental part of that, we can systematically turn off. We can turn off that hyperactive circuit through doing various types of parasympathetic activating activities. Uh, and when we go deeper into the light body, we find that we have um, chakras, front and back, that are not in synchronization. And when they start to synchronize, we start to be able to harmonize with our environment better. A lot of times we find that the kundalini channels are distorted as well. So there's a lot of different factors that get knocked out of either, you could say, alignment or symmetry, balance in terms of movement and also rate of movement. And as we do the different components of the light body work, we bring those back into balance, symmetry, and alignment, which is also another dimension that I was just about to talk about within proprioception. Because when we have these misalignments at higher levels, the proprioceptive system detects that. And as we work with the proprioceptive system, and I'm going to talk about some fundamental ways to do that in a minute, as we work with that, um, we start to be able to detect these distortions, these lack of harmony in chakras and in the kundalini channels. And it's not usually not something that happens in a moment, but when we go through an alignment, which can take 5 to 10 minutes, 15 minutes, sometimes even less, you will feel an easing of that kind of stress, those kind of sensitivities. It may not disappear completely in one moment because it's a process usually of time. For those to um, become some like a sensitivity also took time. And there's a lot of different layers and components that are changing and compressing to make that sensitivity. So all that has to unwind. But we have tools where we can invoke, initiate those changes. Yeah.
It's an interesting question, and as you're talking, I'm getting almost a picture that neurosensitivity is an enhanced sensitivity, but coming more, as you said, from the sympathetic autonomic response, like an overdrive. So it's more like reactivity. And when the proprioceptors are more active, it's a person is responding more from a relaxed state. So not just reacting, but a, it's a deeper accessing of sensory input, really.
Yeah.
And there is a neurology to it. When the proprioception is more active, there are literally proprioceptors in our tendons and in our muscle spindle fibers that enhance our ability to detect subtle degrees of motion.
That's important to understand how the biology of it works, the physiology. That we're talking about something that's not just theoretical, but it's actually functional in the body. This detection of and this activity of bringing things back into harmony and to keeping the body in balance and detecting motion and creating balance. So as we work with the proprioceptive system at a very basic level, we start to develop something called proprioceptive awareness. And that also made me think of something related to what Lynn just said and to the question, is that we also can differentiate sensitivities that are really positive and sensitivities that may be overbearing that we could modify so that they're not so imposing. The ones that are positive, oftentimes it's something that's trying to move us in a different direction. Like we can enter into like even a room, in our house, and we notice that we're sensitive to something in the room, and that may be something that's unhealthy, stressful for us. So we either reorganize that room if it's in our house, may mean changing the color of the room. There can be objects in there that are um, triggering memories. And so those kind of sensitivities can become very positive. Um, so making that differentiation. Proprioceptive awareness then is something that develops out of that. And it means that the proprioceptive activity consciously is applied to um, more subtle levels, to different levels of how we're functioning. Like I mentioned, to the the interactiveness of the physical body to the energy body, the state of the energy body, whether it's functioning so-called alignment or symmetry or not. And we can detect the movement of energy and these channels and these movements like chakras, and start to consciously make adjustments. So we're doing that through our awareness, through our consciousness, and through the development of this proprioceptive awareness. So I would say that that's like the real baseline of the inner guidance. It's always trying to tell us something if we can listen. We know that we've been systematically shut down from feeling certain things. We've been told, well, don't feel that, or don't be this way, don't be that way, when it was like an actual feeling that we had, and we shut it down. So the information also got pushed aside or suppressed, and so we start to be able to notice that and to pay attention to it. Um, the body, as it becomes back in alignment, as I mentioned, starts to function in present time, and that's real time. And that there is a physiology to being in the past, not just kind of like a mental state or emotional, like, oh, well, that don't be in the past, or I shouldn't be in the past. We have to resolve the physiology that's going on that keeps us there, that anchors us in the past. As an example, what we talked about with the nervous system and these hyper facilitated nerve circuits in the body. There's also another layer of coming back into alignment. One is the body, but also our, our system is evolving. And there's a wide spectrum of where we are in that evolution in different pockets of humanity. Um, and with that, we're undergoing physical change, change of the nervous system, and the energy system itself is transforming and changing, which is challenging the body and body systems also to make adjustments, to adapt. And if we're bogged down in these various entrapments, misalignment, we start to feel friction as we do consciousness work, spiritual work, because it initiates these transformations that are going on through evolution, and it creates a friction between that movement and the fact that the body's anchored down in these compressions, frictions, stresses that are also leaking our life force. So we feel that, and when we start to work with this alignment process, we're not only like recovering what happened in the past. Now, also our attitudes about the future are coming from the past. So in that way, we see that past and future somehow are the same thing on a linear timeline. And as we come into alignment, we enter a present time continuum. So that's just another transformation or change of perception that we undergo. So part of it is recovering in a way from a deficit. And the other part of this is keeping up with something positive that's coming, that's happening. And whether we see it, we don't, it's underway. We're changing. We're changing on so many levels all at one time. And it's not just our thoughts. It's just not our awareness, which is kind of like a invisible nebulous um, uh, dimension, but it's also the physical body, the chemical body is changing. And so to allow that to happen, I talked about this last week when I was talking about some of the challenges that take place in our physical body, some of the things that doctors can't diagnose, weaknesses, immune difficulties. Um, I would say that it's worth considering in any situation, any kind of physical condition, mental or emotional condition that is undiagnosable, or the only solution is, well, let's medicate it. When maybe it'll work if we medicate it, we don't know. So we could also consider that this is more of a problem coming from this friction of natural evolution of the energy system, of the chemistry, even of the formation of the body, um, and the way that the body is anchored in its rigidity and past restriction and past compression. So how can we um, enter into this proprioceptive awareness? Lynn? Oh, okay.
Andrea from Wales asked, I receive guidance in a more shamanic form, a sense of getting communications. This seems less about physical, emotional alignment and more about navigating in a very different world, becoming aware, for example, of what might be happening relationally behind what is manifesting visibly. Is this a completely different topic? I wasn't sure because you used the word guidance.
Mhm. I don't think so. I think it's another language or labeling of a similar dynamic, um, where we're receiving information in different ways. And it's up to us to validate that, to confirm that. And I think that with any way that, whether it's the ways that I'm talking about or other ways that we're being exposed to get what we can call guidance or information, that we have to have an honest confirmation process where we self-validate the truth of it, and we're willing to, discard some of it, all of it, or we realize that it's something that really is working, and we have a way um, to see that, to test that. That's why it's good to start on a basic level, so we can test things that are less consequential. Yeah,
Right. Yeah, better say.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you use the word inner guidance when you talk about the proprioceptive system. And I think of it in a way of, well, I don't think of it, I experience it also in a way of going into my own physiology, my own cellular nervous network to access flows of information that are more personally accessible and then will help me bridge to maybe wider cosmic or earth dimensions, other shamanic fields, but sometimes coming into contact with different fields of information or guidance are overwhelming for our personal body. So to me, this proprioceptive work is a really good way to bridge the individual to more larger cosmic forces and flows of information. Of course, at one level, we're all one, right? But while I'm in this physical body, at least, I also experience many times not being fully connected and not able to withstand the force and breadth of the information that is out there. But inside my body, there's like a natural regulation system that lets me access frequencies and amounts that I can digest and work with.
Okay, and that's also part of the proprioceptive process, to see what your capacity is in that moment. And you can test it, but not to over exceed it to the point of detriment. And the reason I used inner guidance is because that's how we encounter it a lot of times in the beginning, your inner voice. Not that it's always inside. I mean, if you go to higher frequencies where inside and outside are the same thing at the same time, then we could look at it that way as well. However, like as an example, intuition is something that takes place more or less in the vibrational body. And it's not something that we feel. A lot of times people say, oh, I'm having intuition, I'm getting goosebumps. Well, if we're feeling it, it's more instinct. Intuition is something that doesn't really have feeling to it. It has more of an impression, has more of a stimulation, but more in the outer um, vibrational body. And then it does what we call stepping down. Those frequencies of intuition step down into more denser frequencies and vibrations, and then we perceive it as a concept or something that we can speak it. But when pure intuition is not something that we can right away speak, we sit with it and we absorb it on that level because it's more accurate than the level where we actually turn it into concept. So I only use the word inner guidance, um, because that's how a lot of people, or inner voice, because that's how people first uh, encounter it. Certainly, if we go out in nature and we expand ourselves and our detection system, which includes the expanded version of proprioception, we get so much information from nature. We can sit with trees, we can sit with the insect world, um, and the way that they're functioning, we can get the geology around us can really inform us. So higher frequencies of consciousness to the more denser, we can access all of those. It's going to like a central point that's reliable within our system so we can develop a determination of accuracy and validity. And so for that, I think, and it's again, this is what I'm proposing, and this is something that each person has to determine on their own, but that the proprioceptive system at its basic level is a place where you can develop that um, determination of accuracy. So, as an example, here's a way that you can work with the proprioceptive system. Um, we can take a simple stretch position and move into that stretch position. And if we pay attention to the force that's preventing us to go further, of course, when we were children, we could easily go all the way to the floor. So over time, some kind of system of tension developed that now doesn't allow that. So if we pay attention to the line of tension, well, normally when people do stretching, they stretch and hold. They might breathe together with that. But when we do proprioceptive exercise to develop this proprioceptive awareness, we pay attention to the line of tension where we feel the stretch, and we can breathe to that. But what you notice is that that line of tension tries to inform you. And if you pay attention to what it wants to do, it will move you almost always now to a variation of your original position. Now, let me back up and say that from our starting point, and you can use this with any stretch position, posture position, you can use this with Qigong movement, you can use this just from a still place, and I'll talk about that again. But the way to initiate the proprioceptive state so we can detect what this line of tension wants to inform us about is to move into the stretch in slow motion. So you float into it. And I like to do this with an out breath. And the state of slow motion changes our modality of perception. And we feel like now that we're moving a much greater distance because of the slow motion. We just go right to it. It just seems like a few, some inches or a foot. But if we go in slow motion, it may seem like a much greater distance. And we feel gradually the tension line appear. And that's what we want to do. Slow motion, gradually the tension line appears. We can breathe into that tension line. And what we'll notice is that the force of the tension wants to move our body. And we can allow that. Usually we don't. But if we do, it takes us into a variation of that position, sometimes even a totally different position once you start to work with it. And I'm just following that tension line. And when we come to a still point, again, we breathe in. Now, where the tension line is located may have also shifted. It could have gone from the leg in one area to a leg in a different area, or it might have gone more to the back, more up into the neck. And so when you finally come into the still point, you breathe to the tension line again. And you may notice that it takes you again. Sometimes the subtle adjustments, but sometimes they're quite deep. And a lot of times we'll be in a position, it seems like it takes you further, deeper into a position. So all these things you start to become aware of. And then there may come a point where we feel like it's played itself out. And then what I recommend is from wherever that was taking you from the original position, then with a deep breath out, float back to the upright position. I recommend that you stop at the upright position, let the body gently stop, and notice your body in the area around the body. And a lot of times you're going to feel like something keeps moving, even though the physical body is still. It's almost like the body, some part of you kept moving in a different direction, a certain direction. And that is the activity of proprioception, anticipating where you might have gone next. So this is a very basic level, and you can do that with any stretch position. You can use this one, you can use this one, you can use different extension positions like this one, whatever you feel like. You can even just sit and do your parasympathetic breathing. And just in sitting, you may notice that your body wants to actually move. And then come to where's my tension line? I feel it cross my back. Breathe into it. May take several breaths. Sometimes just one. The tension line now moved up into my neck. Breathe into that tension line. Now, the proprioceptive system, since it's always working to maintain alignment or correct misalignment, is actually taking you through a series of self-corrective movements. They're not always symmetrical. As a matter of fact, some of them are very asymmetrical positions. And so it's because the body wants to unwind and correct, it's taking you through this self-corrective series of movements, no matter what your starting point is. If you follow it continually, a lot of times you'll wind up in positions that normally you can't get into. And it takes you in and out of those positions very smoothly because of the adjustment. Each step of the way opens up the door for further movement. Basically, the body in alignment is a dynamic motion happening at the subtle level of the vertebrae, of the tissue, always changing, always adapting. And when we lose that adaptability, and we're also draining life force to try to regain it, um, then we become less, in a sense, alive, less engaged, less enthusiastic. So this is just the starting point. In our materials that we present on our website, we have this in quite a few different places. We have much more extensive um, instruction and detail about proprioceptive. We'll call it exercise for now. Sometimes it's like a proprioceptive journey, because once you initiate it, you you actually go on to into a journey, not only into your body but into the atmosphere. And it's very pleasant, and also to notice how you feel afterwards, because it um, initiates your creativity. Because in a sense, being alive is being creative. Being having a life is already a creation. So when you regain your alignment, you recover life force, which then translates into forms of creativity. So I hope that you'll practice proprioceptive exercise and learn to uh, develop the ability um, of feeling the joy of it, how pleasant it is to do it. And I'm just speaking from my experience. It's energizing and it frees up my creative impulses. Um, are there any other comments?
And you've used it as a main tool to open up sensitivity and perception so that people can more easily work with things like the chakras, the meridians, the outer body layers, right?
Exactly. So once we start to detect these basic things that I'm talking about during the exercise, we become much more clear about detecting the motion and the state of the chakras, the individual ones, their front and back counterparts, the vertical column of energy from the crown to the root versus the 5 horizontal, the kundalini channel. So, like Lynn just said, um, we start at this basic level of detection, but that expands. So we start to be able to detect what was formerly the subtle levels, but they start to become as real as physical sensations as you work with them. You can apply that sensitivity to acupuncture points. You can activate acupuncture points um, for sleep, for digestion, for mood change, and a lot of times the result will be quite profound. Sometimes it's just a minimal, subtle change, but there's a whole spectrum of how it impacts. And for me, it's almost, I mean, it's always worth it. It's always worth doing it. And so it is, this is a door that we can go through to become more precise with how we're regulating and developing the components of the next system emerging in evolution, like a digestive, like a respiratory, circulatory, nervous system. Now we're developing our light body energy system, which is the outer body itself, which is like a bioplasmic field, and the chakras and the kundalini channels, and they're all interacting. And once they start to reach a certain level of interaction, then it produces a synergy that takes us into higher states, further states of this development. Our body's also seeking to become adaptable and to become flexible so that we can align to these changes of the energy body. It's not always that we want the energy body to align to the physical body, but the calling is a lot of times that the physical body needs to align to the energy body. The energy body is much more fluid, it's much more movable. As an example, all the books are trying to show us where the chakras are anatomically. And that's an okay idea. But in the end, the chakras are located in a more fluid level, which is the etheric body. And so when we feel a chakra, we may feel it in a different anatomical position. And we may notice sometimes that we need to adjust our posture, our anatomical um, alignment so that we can link in to the precise connection to the energy body. And so I've been using this term that we're becoming morphogenic beings, that the physical body can morph, can change, and our morphology, in other words, our what was formerly our biological state, has this ability to become flexible, changeable. And so it's a morphology, and we enter into a morphogenic state. More on that as we go along, because it's very important to understand this ability of the physical body connecting to the energy body, and that the chakra location of the etheric body may cause the sensation of the chakra to appear slightly different when we connect to the chakra in the different activities that we're doing. So trying to, just determine it from a precise anatomical location all the time is not going to work. We have to determine where is that chakra in the etheric layer at that moment, and let our body adapt to that. So I think I covered a lot today. It's been, a lot of things that just kind of popped up, and Lynn has another comment here.
Oh, well, Zoe said yes. It helps detect the overall global sense of the energy in the body and the field, which are one, where the density or laxity is. Doing these exercises has helped me develop that naturally. So she was talking about, the proprioceptive system.
Yeah, and how it expands. If you haven't done the proprioceptive exercise, it's not just exercise. It really is a journey, an experience. And it's healing, but it's also awakening. And it's also developing an awareness level, proprioceptive awareness. So I couldn't encourage you more to participate in it. And like I said, we have a lot of materials. You can just use the guideline that I just presented. But again, to any stretch position, you can do it while you're doing something like Qigong, where there's motion. You may notice that as you're moving through different motion, if you're connecting to the proprioception, it may take you in a different direction than you were supposed to go, so to speak. So it gives us that flexibility, and I would really love to hear from you about what your experiences are once you start to work with it, or if you are working with it, like Zoe just mentioned her experience. So I think I'm ready to sign off. How about you, Lynn? That was it. The proprioceptive. Yeah, I mean, I can review it again. That the trigger is, start with a simple position. Breathe in upright, and then make the slow motion way slower than you think. Really slow with your eyes closed. And you'll feel that there's a switchover point from where you normally feel motion to this feeling of floating. And you'll float and just ease into the point of limitation. Don't force through. Where is the tension line or lines? Sometimes it's in two places. Breathe into that tension line. You're also directing your life force back into a deep layer of the body, the tendon and the ligament. And then we'll wait to see if the body wants to move you into another low direction. At a certain point, if you stop, feel the tension line again, breathe into it. And you can continue with that. And you get the feeling, okay, it played out now. And then from wherever you are, when you get that feeling, breathe in and let yourself slowly float back and come back to the upright position. Gently stop and just see if you detect the sensation that something keeps moving. You can ask yourself two questions that are interesting. What is that keeps moving? And two, from where do I notice that? And that in itself will be quite a awakening. So I wish everyone the best until we see each other again. Thanks to Lynn for all the technical work and also guiding the discussion. And we look forward to hearing from you in between these sessions, um, sharing, our stories, information, questions, and staying in touch. So thanks a lot, everyone. See you soon.